Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. Zach O'Reilly yawned as he slumped back in his pilot's seat, rubbing his temples and staring out at the vast expanse of stars. His ship, the Silver Speeder, hummed around him, occasionally sputtering like an old dog with a bad cough. Zach reached for his coffee, cold and stale, but better than nothing, and took a bitter sip. Just another day in paradise, he muttered to himself, scanning the delivery orders that blinked across the screen. As far as gigs went, being a space courier wasn't the worst job in the galaxy. You got to see new planets, meet strange species, and dodge the occasional asteroid belt. But for Zach, the glamour had worn off long ago. Every job was a ticking time bomb, waiting for something to go wrong, and it usually did. Today's delivery was supposed to be simple. A rare alien artifact destined for a research facility on Riser 3, the kind of job that might score him some bonus credits if it all went off without a hitch. Zach peered at the package nestled in the back of the cargo hold. It was about the size of a basketball, wrapped in a layer of pulsating blue light. The label attached read "Handle with care" in a dozen languages, with the words "Do not open" flashing in red. Zach snorted. Of course, nothing ominous about this one. He double-checked the coordinates and set the autopilot. Riser 3 was a remote planet, but at least it wasn't in any sketchy territory. Zach stretched his legs and put his feet up on the console, figuring he had a few hours to kill before landing. He flipped on some music, let the soft hum of the ship's engine lull him, and closed his eyes for a nap. The alarms blared suddenly, jerking Zach upright. His heart pounded as he scrambled to shut off the warning signals. The ship lurched sideways, throwing him against the bulkhead. A glance at the console showed a massive anomaly, some sort of magnetic field dragging the Silver Speeder off course. No, 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 Zach shouted, wrestling with the controls. The ship groaned in protest as it careened toward a nearby planet. The coordinates flashed across the screen: Zerith 7, a restricted zone. Zach's stomach dropped. Of all the stars in the galaxy, a broken bar. Zerith 7 was notorious, home to the Tharkans, a paranoid alien species that didn't take kindly to visitors. Zach had no intention of landing there, but it seemed the universe had other plans. The ship rattled as it entered the planet's atmosphere, flames licking the edges of the windshield. Zach gritted his teeth, gripping the controls, trying to keep the ship steady. The Silver Speeder hurtled toward the surface, landing with a bone-jarring crash. Sparks flew from the console, and the lights flickered out. For a moment, there was silence. Then, Zach groaned, unbuckling his seatbelt. Well, that's one way to wake up. The ship was a mess. Panels had come loose, smoke filled the cabin, and the autopilot was fried. Zach staggered to his feet and grabbed his toolkit, muttering curses under his breath. He didn't have time to make repairs, but he needed to assess the damage. More importantly, he needed to figure out how to get the hell off this planet. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden bang on the hull. Zach froze. Another bang, then a hiss, followed by the unmistakable sound of a plasma cutter slicing through metal. Oh, great! Visitors! He darted to the cargo hold, yanked open a panel, and pulled out an old plasma pistol. It wasn't much, but it might buy him enough time to figure out what was going on. As he peeked through the crack in the cargo door, he caught sight of his unwelcome guests, Tharkans. Tall, gray-skinned, and equipped with sleek armor, the Tharkans didn't look like they were here to welcome him with open arms. They had narrow faces, sharp, angular features, and glowing yellow eyes that scanned the wreckage of Zach's ship. Their leader, a particularly menacing-looking Tharkan with a scar down the side of his face, stepped forward, barking orders in their guttural language. Zach swallowed hard. There was no way he could take them all on. The Tharkans were known for their combat skills and advanced technology, and he was just a guy with a half-broken ship and a second-hand pistol. He had two options: try to negotiate or make a run for it. Neither seemed particularly promising. The leader spoke in heavily accented galactic standard. You, Human, step out of the ship, surrender the artifact, and you will be spared. Zack's heart skipped a beat. The artifact, of course. They were here for the package. Whatever was inside that glowing crystal had to be valuably dangerous, even. Zack's mind raced. If he gave it to them, maybe they'd let him go. Or maybe they'd kill him on the spot and take the ship for good measure. His hand tightened around the pistol as he tried to come up with a plan. But before he could make a move, the artifact began to glow brighter, casting an eerie light over the cargo hold. The hum it emitted grew louder, pulsing with energy. Zack's eyes widened as he realized something was very, very wrong. The Tharkans must have sensed it too. The leader barked more orders, and the soldiers raised their weapons, closing in on the ship. Zack didn't have time to think. He grabbed the artifact and shoved it into a containment field, praying it would hold. Then, with a deep breath, he slammed his fist on the emergency escape button, triggering a blinding flash of light. The silver speeder's emergency systems activated, launching him and the containment field through a hidden hatch and into the wilderness beyond. The last thing Zack saw before everything went dark was the look of pure rage on the Tharkan leader's face. When Zack came to, he was lying face down in the dirt, the containment field still humming beside him. He groaned and rolled onto his back, blinking up at the strange purple sky. Zerith 7 was just as inhospitable as he'd heard. Dry, barren, and crawling with hostile aliens. Why is it always me? Zack muttered, sitting up and dusting himself off. He glanced around, trying to get his bearings. The silver speeder was nowhere in sight, which meant the Tharkans probably had it by now. He was stranded, with nothing but a malfunctioning containment field and a highly dangerous artifact. And to make matters worse, he could hear the distant whine of Tharkan patrol ships scanning the area for him. Think, Zack, think. He paced back and forth, running a hand through his hair. He needed to get off the planet, but that wasn't going to happen without a ship. And he sure as hell couldn't outgun the Tharkans. His only option was to find somewhere to hide and hope for a miracle. That's when he spotted Ida's shadowy figure darting between the rocks in the distance. Zack's pulse quickened. Whoever it was, they weren't Tharkan, and they might just be his ticket out of here. Hey, Zack called, waving his arms as he ran toward the figure. The figure stopped, turning to face him. Zack's breath caught in his throat. It was a woman, human by the looks of it, dressed in ragged clothes and armed to the teeth with various makeshift weapons. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her eyes gleamed with suspicion as she raised a blaster in his direction. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice low and dangerous. Zack held up his hands in surrender. "I'm just a courier. I crash-landed here by accident. Please, I just need a way off this planet." The woman narrowed her eyes. "A courier? With that thing?" She pointed at the containment field, which was still glowing ominously. Zack winced. "It's a long story. Look, I don't want any trouble. I just need to get out of here before the Tharkans find me." The woman hesitated for a moment, then lowered her blaster. "You're lucky I'm in a charitable mood today. Follow me." Zack didn't ask any questions as he followed the woman through the barren landscape of Zerith 7. The uneven terrain made it hard to keep pace, but he did his best not to stumble as they weaved between jagged rocks and patches of dry, cracked earth. He kept glancing over his shoulder, half expecting to see Tharkan patrol ships closing in, but the sky remained clear, except for the twin suns casting harsh shadows across the desert. The woman moved with a quiet, determined grace, her blaster always at the ready. Zack had no idea who she was or what she was doing on this planet, but at this point, he wasn't in a position to be picky about his allies. After what felt like an hour of silence, they reached the mouth of a cave, hidden between two massive rock formations. She waved Zack inside before ducking in after him. The cave was dimly lit, the air cool and stale compared to the blistering heat outside. A small camp had been set up near the back of supplies, some basic equipment, and a makeshift workbench littered with tools and scraps of metal. Zack raised an eyebrow as he looked around. Whoever this woman was, She wasn't just some drifter. She was prepared, maybe more than prepared, for whatever Sirius 7 threw at her. She lowered her blaster, but kept her eyes on him. "I'll ask again, who are you?" Zack took a breath, still holding his hands out in a show of peace. "Zack O'Reilly, Space Courier." "I was supposed to deliver that." He nodded toward the containment field to a research facility on Riser 3. "My ship got knocked off course, and now I'm stuck here with the Tharkans breathing down my neck." The woman's eyes flicked to the containment field, then back to Zack. "And you don't know what's inside?" Zack shrugged. "I don't ask questions about the cargo. Not my job." She frowned, clearly not satisfied with that answer, but she didn't press him further. Instead, she walked over to the containment field, crouching down to inspect it. Zack watched her closely, noting the practiced way she handled the device. Whoever she was, she knew her way around high-tech equipment. "So what about you?" Zack asked. "Why are you on Zerith 7? The woman didn't look up from the containment field as she answered. "Lena, and I'm here to stop exactly what you're carrying." Zack blinked. "Wait, stop it? What does that mean?" Lena stood up, brushing dust off her hands. "The crystal in there? It's not just some artifact. It's a prototype for a weapon, a planet destabilizer. If it's activated, it could wipe out an entire planet's infrastructure in minutes, leave it defenseless against any invasion. The Tharkans got wind of it, and now they're after it. If they get their hands on it, they'll use it to expand their empire, take over neighboring systems." Zack's mouth went dry. "You've got to be kidding me. Starmail sent me out here with the thing?" Lena gave him a hard look. "Didn't you wonder why you were flying solo on this run? Or why they didn't send someone more qualified for such a high-risk delivery?" "I figured they were short on pilots," Zack said, but even he could hear the weak excuse in his own voice. In hindsight, it was obvious. Starmail Express wasn't exactly known for prioritizing employee safety, and he'd been more than willing to take the job for the extra pay without asking questions. Lena sighed and crossed her arms. "Well, now you're involved. And since you've got the Tharkans on your trail, we've got to move fast. If they find this cave, we're both dead." Zack swallowed. "Okay, so what's the plan?" Lena tapped the containment field. "We destroy it. There's a black hole not far from here. If we can get to it, we can throw the crystal into it and neutralize the threat for good. But getting there won't be easy. The Tharkans have patrol ships all over this sector, and there's a pirate gang led by a maniac named Captain Rhinox hunting for anything they can scavenge." Zack groaned. "Great. Pirates too? I really hit the jackpot on this one." Lena smirked. "Welcome to the galaxy." Zack wasn't sure how much of her plan was optimism and how much was sheer desperation, but it wasn't like he had any better ideas. Getting off Zerith 7 with the Tharkans and now pirates on their tail was going to be nearly impossible, but at least Lena seemed to know what she was doing. "We can use my ship," Lena said, nodding toward the back of the cave. Zack hadn't noticed it before, but there, hidden in the shadows, was a small spacecraft. It wasn't much to look at, a beat-up old Dressler-class shuttle that had clearly seen better days, but it would do the job. "Does it fly?" Zack asked, eyeing the ship warily. "Barely," Lena replied, her tone grim. "But it's our only shot." Zack wasn't about to argue. They loaded the containment field into the ship's cargo hold, then double-checked the weapons systems. The Rustler didn't have much firepower, but it had enough to fend off a small attack, which Zack hoped would be enough to keep them alive. As they strapped in, Lena took the pilot's seat, and Zack slid into the co-pilot's chair. The ship's controls lit up with a flicker of life, and the engines roared to life with a metallic cough. "Here goes nothing," Lena muttered, lifting the ship off the ground. They shot out of the cave and into the open sky, the twin suns beating down on the Rustler's hull. Lena quickly engaged the cloaking device, but Zack noticed that it flickered in and out, barely holding together. "Is this thing going to make it?" Zack asked, gripping the armrests. "It'll get us where we need to go," Lena said, but the look on her face didn't inspire much confidence. As they soared into the upper atmosphere, Zack kept his eyes on the radar. Sure enough, a cluster of Tharkan patrol ships appeared on the screen, closing in fast. "Brace yourself," Lena said, tightening her grip on the controls. The Tharkans opened fire the moment they spotted the Rustler, their plasma cannons lighting up the sky with bolts of blue energy. Lena swerved and dodged, pulling the ship into sharp maneuvers that had Zack's stomach flipping with every turn. "We can't outrun them forever," Zack said, his voice tense. "I know," Lena snapped, her eyes narrowing. "I'm working on it." Just then, the radar pinged again, this time signaling the arrival of a new group of ships. Zack's blood ran cold as he recognized the signature of the incoming vessels. "Pirates," he whispered. "Rhinox's crew." The pirates weren't subtle about their approach. A massive pirate ship appeared on the horizon, flanked by smaller attack fighters, all headed straight for the Rustler. "We've got to get out of here," Zack shouted. Lena gritted her teeth, flipping a series of switches on the console. "Hold on." The Rustler shot forward, its engines straining as Lena pushed the ship to its limits. Plasma bolts and laser fire streaked past them, lighting up the darkness of space with bursts of color. Zack could hear the ship's systems groaning under the pressure, warning alarms blaring in his ears. Just when it seemed like they wouldn't make it, Lena hit the throttle one last time, sending the Rustler into a warp jump. The stars stretched into long streaks of light, and the pursuing ships vanished from view. Zack exhaled, slumping back in his seat. "We made it." "Don't relax yet," Lena said, her voice tight. "We're not out of the woods. We've still got to reach that black hole, and there's no guarantee they won't follow us." Zack didn't argue. He knew Lena was right. They had bought themselves some time, but the Tharkans and Rhinox's crew wouldn't give up that easily. They'd be back, and Zack had the sinking feeling that when they did, things were going to get a lot worse. The ship exited warp space just outside the gravity well of the black hole. Zack stared out at the swirling void, a pit of nothingness that seemed to stretch forever. "We're really going to throw that thing in there?" Zack asked, eyeing the containment field in the cargo hold. "It's the only way," Lena replied, already preparing the controls for the final approach. "Once it's in the black hole, it'll be gone. No one will ever be able to use it again." Zack nodded, though he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't going to be as easy as Lena made it sound. As they neared the event horizon, the ship began to shake violently, the gravitational forces pulling at the hull. Lena wrestled with the controls, trying to keep them steady, but Zack could see the strain on her face. Suddenly, the radar lit up again. Tharkan ships, and behind them, Rhinox's pirate fleet. They had followed them through warp space. "They're here," Zack shouted. Lena cursed under her breath. "We don't have time for this. We've got to drop the crystal now." Zack sprang into action, racing to the cargo hold to release the containment field. He grabbed the controls, his fingers trembling as he prepped the field for launch. But just as he was about to eject the crystal into the black hole, the ship took a direct hit. The explosion rocked the Rustler, throwing Zack off his feet. The ship's systems flickered, and alarms blared as warning lights flashed across the console. "Zack!" Lena shouted from the cockpit. "We're losing power." "I'm working on it," Zack yelled back, scrambling to his feet. But it was too late. The Tharkans had caught up, and their ships were closing in fast. The Rustler shook again as more plasma fire rained down on them, and Zack could feel the ship starting to break apart. In a last-ditch effort, Zack hit the release button, launching the containment field out into space. The crystal tumbled toward the black hole, spinning wildly as it was sucked into the void. For a moment, everything went still. Zack held his breath, watching as the crystal vanished into the darkness. Then, the black hole pulsed. A wave of energy exploded out from the event horizon, catching the Tharkan ships and Rhinox's fleet in its wake. Zack could see them being torn apart, their hulls crumpling under the force of the shockwave. "Zack!" Lena screamed. Zack didn't have time to react before the Rustler was caught in the blast. The ship was flung backward, spinning out of control as the black hole's gravity tried to pull them in. Everything went dark,